Hi, everyone. My name is Eric Greenberg. This is Dr. Lori Hochman. We're both from the Department of Physical Therapy in the School of Health Professions, and we were asked by Flame Glazier to demonstrate a little tutorial on how to get started using Zoom for our telecommunicating with our teaching online. I have a little PowerPoint that we're going to start. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen with Lori. You know what? You don't even need to share the screen, but I'm going to share it anyways. And now Lori should be able to see my screen. Do you see my screen, Lori? Yeah, so during this demonstration, I'm going to be acting as the instructor. Lori's going to be basically the student. Obviously, you're going to have a lot more students involved, and we'll go through how to navigate Zoom with multiple students as well. So once again, this is going to be using Zoom for distance learning. The first thing that we're going to do is talk about some of the Zoom features, kind of go step by step through them, but also more importantly, I think strategies for how to implement it into e-learning to make it a little bit more digestible for these students. So when you do set up your meeting, I do think it's important that you'll see this copy invitation. The screen may look a little differently depending upon the version that you have of Zoom, but you're going to see this copy invitation, and I definitely recommend taking that, copying it, and pasting it into an email and sending it through Blackboard or however you communicate with all of your students in the class prior to the recording, so they know how to join the meeting. It does give you an option for a telephone meeting or a video and voice. And I do recommend for the e-learning, obviously the video and the voice is going to be a lot more beneficial for you. Also towards the bottom, this may be an advanced meeting options or meeting options depending upon the screen that you have. But it's going to be important that we do record these sessions that we do have with our students, and this gives you, Zoom gives you an option to record the meeting automatically and save it to your desktop right after that. Now, if you don't check this box, there is a way that you can actually record the meeting throughout the Zoom meeting. So so have no fear if you forget to do that. I think importantly, have participants be muted when they do enter the room, because if some do enter a little bit later, you don't want them to disturb anyone coming in there. So there are a lot of different options that you can play around with on this one. So we're going to take you through how to use the different tools and navigate the different toolbars associated with Zoom. So instead of talking about all this, I'll kind of go through each of those. I'm going to stop the share here so you get to see those toolbars. On the bottom, you're going to see there's a mute toolbar. Now, if I were to mute this, this would mute my that would mute my sound so that nobody would else be able to hear that, along with stopping the video. So then if I stop the video, Lori would only be seeing a big green E on her screen and she wouldn't be seeing me. So if you do have a bad hair day, you could do this. However, I don't recommend doing that because I think there is some value in the student seeing your face and seeing a real person going through this topic. I think it adds a sense of more connection, which we already have a little disconnect being remote. There are some different options that you may see here as well. I wouldn't go too crazy with that. The invite button, that if one student you didn't get the email, you get an email during the Zoom meeting that they lost the email, you can actually go ahead and invite different people through Zoom and copy that invitation and send it directly out there. So that's another option that you can do. As far as managing our participants, so if you click on that button, you're going to see how Lori is now above me in a box, and this is what we call the gallery view, and this is now the speaker view. So the gallery view enables me to see a bunch of different students at one time, which I think is really, really important when you're starting to do distance learning, to make sure that you are connecting with multiple people as much as you can. It almost looks like the Brady Bunch opening where you have multiple people on top of each other, but I think as an instructor, it's really important to pick up those nonverbal cues from your students, and the gallery view is going to be able to do that as much as you can. Now, speaker view is a little different. Speaker view, when you click on that, it brings the person who is speaking to the forefront of the screen. So if you're doing a lot more group discussions, speaker view will enable the person speaking to be front and center, and then make everybody else in the background a little smaller. So I think that there are some benefits to each of those, depending upon what you're doing with your lecture. So I'm going to go back to gallery view just because it's a little easier for me. On the bottom, you also see a polling. This is a really nice option that was built into the newer versions. It basically allows you to do a poll on the fly, just to gauge if your students are understanding the concepts that you're doing, even if they're not saying it verbally. So, for example, I made a poll up earlier, and I'm going to launch this poll. So Lori doesn't see this on her screen at this point, but when I launch the poll, she now sees what is your favorite color, and then she will actually pick which one is her favorite color, and she likes blue, and we can end that poll right there. Now we can ask a question almost very pertinent to the information that you were discussing, as a check-in to make sure that they're not in la-la land and they actually are picking up those concepts. And I do think that that is very, very important throughout the session, because there is a little bit disconnect, there is a little bit of mind wandering, there's a lot more distraction with e-learning. And it's also very difficult for you as an instructor to pick up on those nonverbals as much as you would do in class. So this is a nice option that Zoom has put in there. Now, I usually integrate Poll Everywhere into my PowerPoints, so that's another option that you can do as well, that you don't have to use their polling options. And you can put in those polls prior to getting on the meeting, or you could do it on the fly as well if you're saying, hey, I'm really kind of losing these folks, but and I want to see where they are. So there are a lot of different options that you can do. The share screen and the chat button, those are going to be the two most important things that you're going to be using more than likely. The share screen enables the students to see exactly what you're seeing on their screen. So for example, I'm going to share my screen, and what comes up is that there are multiple ways that we can share our screen. I can either share my entire desktop, I can either share an individual window that I already have open. For example, I have my my control panel open, I have a YouTube tab open, and I also have my PowerPoint open. So I can go to those individual ones if I don't want the students to be seeing exactly what I'm seeing and only see certain things. There's also an option for a whiteboard, which I think is really important. So it's almost like a dry erase board in your class. So if I do a whiteboard, now Lori is seeing a whiteboard, and if I wanted to demonstrate something or free text, I can write So we can say, hi Lori, what is your favorite color? Or we can put, if you wanted to put a math problem on there, if you're teaching math, or you can even free draw some different things on here as well. If you do have a nice little touch screen, or if you're working off an iPad, or if you're working off one of those Chromebooks or something like that, that may be even more beneficial for you, because drawing with a mouse may not be as easy. Okay. You can see right here I had my chat button lit up, and that's because one of my students was typing. So Lori actually wrote blue to everybody, which is a really nice feature right here. So this chat, I'm just going to go back and close that just so you guys can see. But you can see this chat icon right over here. So if I click on that chat icon, a small box pops out on the right-hand side of the screen. And this is a really nice way for students to communicate with you without interrupting the class. They can also communicate with other students within the class. And you, as the teacher, can be the one authorizing what they are allowed to do. So for example, if I click on these three dots, I can actually say that these students are not allowed to type anything. They're not allowed to contact me. I don't know why you would do that. But if you wanted to do it without anyone, this is where I can only be the one to chat. Everyone publicly, meaning that whatever Lori types will go to everybody in the class, or Lori can then also pick out just typing to one person, and that person is the only one to get that response. So there's a lot of different things that you could do. We can also send along different files. You can see up here, I actually I sent a screenshot to Lori earlier, but if we do File, you go to your computer, I can actually send a different file to everybody on that chat. It's really a nice way for the students can also, if they're not really understanding something, they can ask a question and not to you directly or anonymously to make sure that you can go over certain things. So it's a really nice way for you to check in with your folks. The record button is the one I talked about earlier, where if you do want to only record parts of your class, this is where you would press record. It's pretty self-explanatory right there. It does save directly to your desktop, I believe. I wouldn't worry too much about closed captioning. Breakout rooms is a really nice option that, under the new Zoom, which I do like. It's a way for you to do group work within the e-learning environment. So if I were to click on this, it enables me to split up my participants into multiple groups. I can even have them do it automatically, or I can actually assign the groups and create those breakout groups. Further down in this demonstration, I'll show you where it could have been really beneficial to use. The reaction button is another new thing that Zoom put in there, and it's a way for you to gauge understanding from your students instead of them saying it verbally. So if I say to a group of 30 students in our Zoom meeting, is everyone understanding this? Instead of everyone saying yeah, Lori would say thumbs up, or if she's really nice, she may give me an applaud. Let's see. There you go. Thank you very much. So I think it's a really nice way for them to check in. It's also a way that they can potentially raise their hand to say, hey, I'm not getting something, if you're not seeing it in the chat button. That's basically it for the bottom bars at this point. So we're going to go through. I'm actually going to share my screen with Lori so she can see everything. Now I'm sharing the desktop. And the reason why I'm sharing the desktop is because this is going to enable me to toggle through different screens a little bit easier. If I were to just share one screen, I would then have to go to stop share and then reshare to go to a different screen if I wanted to just show my YouTube video. So I'm going to use the desktop, which I think is the easiest. However, just make sure that you shut off all of your personal stuff that you have coming in prior to the class, because then they would be able to see that kind of stuff. So make sure your email's not open, you don't get your notifications, or turn your notifications off. So I tend to really like to bring in video into the into my PowerPoints. I think it's a really nice multimedia thing to do, especially e-learning wise. And if you do it through PowerPoint, you have the ability to mark up certain things, bring in a laser pointer. If I wanted to do, if I wanted to do more of a pen and draw, I can then draw as she's moving. If I wanted to type something, I can type something. So I think it's a really nice way that, aside from just having your mouse or your pointer to call certain things out, and almost like you have a dry erase board on your PowerPoint like we may in class. So I think it's a really nice way to do things. I also like to bring in YouTube videos, and if you do this, there's a few different ways that you can do it. My preferred method is to, if I'm teaching live and the students are actually with me in the classroom, I tend to do more of a hyperlink in there. Now, if you do a hyperlink, it works fine if you share the screen, if you share your whole desktop. However, if you're not sharing your whole desktop, doing the hyperlink is not going to be so great. Because nobody's watching. And I closed the screen, so there you go. Or you can do it where you could just toggle between different screens and get into it. For me, I have my Mac set up where I have hot corners, so my hot corners will then allow me to navigate between different screens at different very seamlessly, so you don't waste the time and the students kind of can see that happening. So if you, for me, what I would do is have all my screens kind of open already and set to the spot that I would want them to be in prior to logging on and interacting with the students, so that everything is all ready to go. Anything you want to add there, Lori? I think you're on mute.
So yes, I would have them on in the background too. So this way you can just toggle between the two screens and move seamlessly. And I would suggest if you're going to have them watch something that's, in a long video, give them some things that you want them to be really zoning in on in that video so that they're coming out of that video with some takeaways that they're going to then share with the class so they know why they're watching that video. So maybe some discussion questions that they should be thinking about before they come back together as a group, because you're going to lose them for those 5 minutes or however long that video is.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And Lori being on mute actually reminded me of something. I definitely recommend that all the participants. So Zoom allows up to 300 participants and unlimited time with the account that we have. So if you have multiple people in your class, I recommend that they come in and they all mute each other, because especially being at home, you're going to hear a lot of dogs barking, babies crying. And a lot of background noise that could be very, very distracting. So unless they are participating actively, then they should mute themselves, and then they can come out and be muting. So I think making that caveat before the class begins is going to be really, really important to start setting the stage. Also give them guidelines on how they're going to interact with you, whether through the message board, whether through it be one of those icons of the applaud or the thumbs up, or whether it's verbally just coming off mute and interrupting. So however you feel most appropriately, that's going to be totally your own preference. How we like to, I think so. So that's basically how to use Zoom in a nutshell. But I think more importantly is how to integrate it into the e-learning environment. So you can do Zoom a few different ways. You can use it as a replacement for in-person learning. And this is very, very interesting to think about, because you're meeting with your students anywhere between an hour, 75 minutes, to up to 3 hours or 4 hours in our curriculum. And can you imagine being on the computer screen for 3 hours with the same instructor just doing lecture after lecture? So I think if you're doing it as a replacement where for your in-person time, less is more. So less on the slide. Don't try to bite off a little bit more than you can chew. And more importantly, I think you need to encourage student engagement. And how to do that is a few different ways. So number one is do a lot more open-ended questions. Put a lot less on the slides that you're doing, because if you're putting too much on the slides, then they're going to kind of get lost. If you have less on the slides, that keeps them engaged, because they may need to be filling in the blanks here and there. They need to pay attention. It forces them to pay attention. I also think that you really need to check in with them quite often. So stop sharing your screen, your PowerPoint, and going back to this gallery view to make sure that they're seeing you, you're seeing them intermittently, just to say, hey, yeah, you guys understanding this? Are we good to go? Is there anything that we need to stop? Am I going too quickly? So just doing check-ins more so than you would do probably in person, because you're not going to be able to gauge their nonverbals as easily.
Yeah, and you can, when you bring them back, so that you, in that gallery view, you can see up to 49 students, I believe. So it's going to be a big screen with a lot of faces, so you can have them kind of raise their hand. Is everybody on the same page? If not, put your question in the chat box or ask it out loud, because you can usually get a general understanding of everybody nodding their heads, or yeah, I'm good, move on, or something like that. So, but definitely stop every so often just to make sure that everybody's still with you. Depending on how big your screen is that you're lecturing off of, you might not want to see that whole gallery. You only might see about 16 of them on the side, depending on how you set up your gallery. It might be up top or it might be on the side, and you have that control to set that up. Just it's only Eric and I here, so it's a little hard to see. But I was on a call this morning with about 40 people, and I was able to see everybody. So you can set that up and play with it depending on how many faces you want to see.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the most important things. At least when I teach, I really like to see the reactions and read the nonverbals of the students to make sure that they're staying up with me. So, all right, I'm going to share the screen again with Lori. And I also think that, especially being online, them just watching a PowerPoint and you just do PowerPoint over and over and over again, you need to integrate various forms of multimedia, whether it be YouTube videos, whether it be different videos, whether it be the poll everywhere. Um, I think that gets really, really, it breaks it up a little bit. I also use my animations very strategically in PowerPoint instead of just having all my words or everything on the slide, to make it a little bit more dynamic, to focus the student as to where I want them to look without actually saying it. So I use my animations quite um, deliberate and focused. I think I have an example of this on the next slide. So here's just an example of a slide that I typically would use. We're talking about osteoarthritis and goals in physical therapy with someone in the management of osteoarthritis. And we can manage it a few different ways. We can decrease joint stresses with patient education, improving force attenuation, and increasing range of motion. Now, I would give this slide to my students to have them problem solve what different kinds of techniques we can use for patient education, what type of techniques we could do to improve force attenuation, what type of techniques we could do to increase range of motion or surface area of the joint. And I think here we can use that group that group, where is it here? The breakout rooms really nicely to kind of take that home point. And then as they come back into a group together, then you can start to fill in what you wanted them to see. So I think less is more on a slide. Allow them to problem solve, allow them to become a little bit more integrated into the lecture instead of being that sage on the stage. I think is even that much more important when you're doing distance type learning. I think Zoom actually works even better when you're doing it asynchronously. So if we're using, so asynchronous meaning that the students work at their own, everyone is meeting but at different times. So meaning that you set something out and they're working at their own time, at their own pace. Nobody has to be on at the same time. So I think Zoom can be an adjunct to asynchronous material. So if you're meeting with a class, say on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, maybe Monday or Monday and half of Wednesday is devoted to them working on something that was pre-recorded or that you gave them or disseminated to them via Blackboard that they can work through at their own time, whether that be you speaking over a PowerPoint, more of a traditional lecture format, whether it be them reading a journal article, whether it be reading a textbook chapter, whether it be just watching a video and giving them kind of key points to look at. And then the half of the Wednesday class and maybe that Friday class, you come back together and you don't teach any new material, but you integrate and talk about the material that was already presented to them earlier. What I think is really nice about the stuff that you integrate asynchronously is that they can work at their own pace. Doing that, they can go back, rewind, take notes. That being said, I think it's going to be important that you post an associated file with that video. So if you're doing a PowerPoint talkover via PowerPoint, you could do that with Zoom, VoiceThread, PowerPoint, QuickTime Player, whichever your medium you feel most comfortable with, that you give them the actual PowerPoint slides with that as a handout so they can take the notes on that. If you're having them watch some kind of video or a textbook chapter, maybe it's giving them guiding questions along the way to help them kind of see where you wanted what's the focus of that assignment to be doing. However, I think the caveat for this is that our attention spans are only about 15 minutes at most to be able to concentrate, and then we need a break. So if you're doing a 3-hour lecture, it may be nice to break that up into 15-minute increments. So this way the students can watch a whole thing, go back, and know exactly where they were last time when they stop. Instead of being a whole 3-hour thing at one time, which could be very intimidating to them, and they tend to lose interest a little bit. So breaking it up into smaller snippets, 15 of them, whether you give multiple videos at 15-minute increments, I think that is totally acceptable as well. But I think this is where our Zoom meetings could be really good, is taking that material and integrating it into more of a novel situation. So Lori, do you have anything else to add that would be helpful for them?
No, I think we covered it all.
Okay, cool. So if you guys do have any questions, obviously Fran Glazer's office is a wealth of knowledge, but you can also contact us at those contacts on the screen right there, and we'll be happy to help out as best as we could. And hopefully this gives you a little bit of insight into the workings of Zoom and makes you a little bit more comfortable. I do recommend that you play around with it a little bit before you start to integrate it. To get a little bit more comfortable as you start toggling between different screens. I would say in the beginning, try to keep it as simple as possible, and as you get more comfortable, then you could start bringing in different kinds of uh, techniques together. All right. So good luck, and hopefully everyone stays safe and during this time, and we'll pull through. So